All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Right. My name is Alejandro Cremaschi. I'm doing the Preconcert Talk today. I'm a professor of piano and piano pedagogy at the University of Colorado, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today to share some thoughts and some personal ideas about the program that you're about to hear. So it's a very interesting program. I'm really looking forward to it. With some unusual pairings, I have to say. We don't often see recitals where you pair up Mozart with Poulenc, for example, but I think it works, and we are going to find out today. So I will tell you a little bit about some of the pieces, and so we start with Mozart Sonata Köchel 330. We are going to move to some of the Poulenc improvisations. Then Mr. Lewis will perform Debussy's L'Île Joyeuse, and then he's going to play some more improvisations by Poulenc and finish with a Mozart Sonata in C minor K 457. As I said, it's unusual. It's a very interesting arc. I think he's looking for some sort of symmetry, starting with a classical piece from the classical period, then moving to France. It's unusual. Peaking with that Debussy piece, L'Île Joyeuse, which is one of the most exuberant pieces that Debussy wrote in his life, and then kind of bringing us back through Poulenc back to Mozart. So, are there any connections between these composers? First of all, I have to say the pianist is avoiding, I think purposely, perhaps because this is his character, avoiding grandiloquence, avoiding Germanic virtuosism and Wagnerian music or romantic exuberance, and going for a more intimate dialogue, I think, with the music that he's performing. So, any links between these composers? I would say between Mozart and Poulenc, you can find links such as spontaneity, naturalness. It's music that flows really with ease. It's almost natural. Both composers wrote quickly, and they wrote in a very flowing manner. Both of them excelled on melody. They are great melodists. Poulenc wrote many, many songs, and the music, piano music actually shows that. Melody is really the king of these two composers. You can also find wit in both of them, humor sometimes, and so forth. Now, between Poulenc and Debussy, obviously both are French, both write with a French harmonic language from more or less the same epoch or the same years. I would say you can also find music that's very high energy, especially in this Debussy piece that you're going to hear today. It's very ecstatic, very joyful, and you can hear some of that also in Poulenc's music. And also very sensuous and sophisticated. So those are some of the connections I can find. I can imagine almost like a day where you wake up with Mozart with this optimistic, elegant mood, ready to go, and then just gradually build up to noon, which is L'Île Joyeuse, the Debussy, which is ecstatic, full of sun, just bursting with energy. And then he's bringing us back to the classical style. However, dusk is not so optimistic as dawn. You'll hear that Mozart's C minor sonata is actually a little bit tempestuous. So I'll tell you a little more about that sonata. So now a little bit about each of the pieces. So the first piece, K330, Mozart wrote it around 1783. This is a time when he was working as a freelance composer and pianist. He worked for many years for the Prince of Colorado in Salzburg. He was never very happy at that job, and so he suddenly decided to become independent. And so he moved to Vienna and started composing concertos, sonatas. Most of the concertos he wrote at the time were written for himself. The sonatas, on the other hand, were written perhaps for aristocratic friends. Many of them were not intended to be concert pieces. And in fact, this sonata probably works better in an intimate setting of an aristocratic concert. So, as I said, you can hear a galant style, poised, elegant, simple, balanced, and very clean. Okay? Particularly, the second movement is one of my favorite movements. The middle section suddenly becomes very, I would say, wistful, kind of foreshadowing what we're going to hear in Poulenc. He writes a whole passage in a minor key suddenly. That comes out of nowhere. It suddenly sounds very, almost sad in a way. In fact, many musicologists thought that perhaps he wrote this sonata a few years earlier when his mother passed away. We know for sure that he wrote the A minor sonata at that time, which is also a very special piece. But some musicologists saw this middle movement as a way of longing for his mother. That has been dispelled because the sonata actually was written a few years later, but I think the character is kind of there. After that, we are going to hear the Poulenc, 15 variations. Now, it's very unusual to hear all 15 in a concert. I was looking at the program. This is the first time these 15 pieces have been played here at the Newman Center, ever. Okay. Some pianists have, performed some of them. I have actually performed maybe 5 or 6 of them. I really love those pieces. But Mr. Lewis actually is choosing to do something that's very unusual. He's starting with number 7 instead of going to number 1. And he's playing a few before doing the Debussy. Okay. So I want to get your attention to a few of those that you're going to hear. If you have a program, you may want to get it out, maybe just take some notes there. So first of all, I have to say that even though Poulenc was a great improviser, he actually sat down to write these pieces. These are not pieces that he improvised at the piano. They are very well crafted with very kind of concise, but I would say very tightly written. He uses motives. He really has a clear idea of the plan for each of them. They are, some of them, very witty, very refined, very urbane, you might say, and then others are very lyrical and very tender. So, number 7 is a wonderful opening. It sets like a suave, tender feel, like spinning off. It's wonderfully rich and pleasant harmonies. Poulenc very often wrote what we call moto perpetuo, or perpetual motion. So many of his pieces started and just kept going, like spinning off. And you can hear that very clear in number 7 over there. 2 others that I want to call your attention to is number 10. It's written as an etude in a way because he takes a chromatic scale, which is a very, I would say, boring exercise, but he dresses it in beautiful harmonies. So a very, very interesting piece. And then number 12. Which is the one that he will play before the Debussy. So number 12 is called Hommage à Schubert. It's an homage to Schubert, the Viennese Austrian composer. And he writes a waltz. This is a waltz that's actually original. It's not written by Schubert, but it could have been very clearly written by Schubert, especially the outer sections. Use harmonies that are very typical of Schubert. It's like a salon waltz, basically. But the middle section, this is where Poulenc kind of brings his Parisian or French, I would say, refinement. He starts using some harmonies that sound so different. It's like gradually shifting us to a different era. And I love this because a lot of those harmonies, whole tone scales, Lydian modes, you will hear in the Debussy. Okay, so I think this is purposely, Mr. Lewis actually did that on purpose, that he would transport us from Austria, from that classical Schubert, to this sound world of Debussy. Anyways, so let's talk about the Debussy. Let me see how much time we have. So, L'Île Joyeuse is the joyful island. This is a very unique piece. He wrote it as an isolated piece. It is actually a concert piece, quite a virtuoso one, and a very effective one, I would say. You hear a lot of suggestion, sensory nuance, but also very athletic writing. So when did he write this? 1904. So in 1903, Mr. Debussy had a torrid affair, you probably read some of that in your notes, with the singer Emma Bardac. Both of them were married at the time, so this was quite a scandal in Paris. So that summer, they decided to flee Paris. They both went to an island, British island called Jersey Island, and had the grandest time there for a few weeks. And later on, they actually divorced their spouses and married. They had a child as well. So L'Île Joyeuse, people think that perhaps he wrote it just remembering that summer that he had spent with his lover at Jersey Island. It's a piece sensuous, full of exuberance and also ecstasy, I would say. Debussy also said that the piece was related to a painting by a Rococo painter, a French Rococo painter, Watteau, that's named L'Embarquement pour Cythère, which is the departure for Cythère, which is a Greek island associated with Aphrodite, who's the goddess of love, Greek goddess of love. The opening of this piece, you're going to hear this shimmering radiance, almost as if suddenly the sun is shining on the waters of the sea when they're going to that island, and the splashing of water. By the way, Debussy loved writing about sun and water. He has several pieces about water and sun. So listen for especially the climax of this piece. I think, to my taste, this is one of the most exciting and ecstatic climaxes that Debussy ever wrote. It's just so exuberant and just full of joy. So after that, we go back to Poulenc. He will start with number 1 this time and goes through several of the improvisations. Finishing with number 15. And number 15 was written much later than the other ones, in 1959. It's an homage to Edith Piaf. And I'm sure you probably have heard the name. Edith Piaf was a French popular singer. She was considered basically kind of the French singer of the first 50 years in Paris. She was iconic, really. And she recorded pieces and songs such as La Vie en Rose, which you may have heard. It's still being played these days, 100 years after she recorded it. And then another one called Non, je ne regrette pas, which is, I don't, what is, my English is failing me suddenly. Well, I'll come back to that, but it's just another very famous song. So I think Poulenc really captures that wistfulness of these French songs, that nostalgia, very, very well. And writes this wonderful piece that is reminiscent of Paris and the Café of Paris. So after that, the transition is going to feel pretty jarring, I would say. We're going suddenly back to Mozart. And this is a Mozart that's a very unusual Mozart. In fact, I was very surprised to see that he would close the concert with this particular sonata. Mozart only wrote 2 sonatas in minor keys, one in A minor and this one in C minor. Okay? Mozart is well known for the kind of clear balance and elegance. Minor keys in music tend to sound sometimes disturbing, sometimes sad, and sometimes agitated. And in fact, you can hear a lot of that in this particular sonata. You will hear a piece that is unusually agitated for Mozart. Starts with these octaves that outline the C minor chord. In fact, it's so foreshadowing of what would come like a couple of decades later in music, that Beethoven, who was a composer obviously almost 20 years younger than Mozart, loved this piece. And not only this piece, but also his C minor concerto. And he wrote a cadenza for the C minor concerto, for example, Beethoven did. So this piece really, really foreshadows that urgency, that volatility, those outbursts that people typically associate with Beethoven. So that's the program. So it's a very big arc. As I said, we start with a classical piece, optimistic, forward-looking. Then we get transported into Paris. We get into this frantic, exuberant, amazing, joyful piece by Debussy. And then gradually, through Edith Piaf, we go back to nostalgia and eventually to a more agitated, somber mood. So I hope you enjoyed the concert. It's been a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to joining you over there and to listen to the concert. Thank you very much.